happy to have you all for our third webinar of the RCERO Live webinar series. So we started this year in September, October, so we're happy to finish the year with this topic on separate collection of biowaste in densely populated areas. Just a couple of words on the RCERO Live series of webinars. We'll be continuing from January, February with a new series. So I'll share more insight into this new series. So for today, we are happy to have three high-level speakers, practitioners, and experts with us to help us navigate in the topic of separate collection of biowaste in densely populated areas. So as you saw in the short explanation of why it's important to have this conversation, biowaste still accounts for the largest fraction in municipal solid waste. And in Europe, only 30% across Europe, 30% of biowaste is currently separately collected and managed, which means that there's a huge potential in properly managing our waste and even reducing it. So we'll have three short presentations that will help us understand how we can actually maximize and create systems, maximize its efficiency, and also make it cost efficient. For this, we'll have a short presentation of each of our speakers, and then we'll take a couple of questions, clarification questions. And at the end, we'll still have half an hour together to dig more into the questions. Just one thing about the different tools that you have in this webinar. You have a chat box, and my colleague Agnese is writing some information over there. So feel free to say hi and just introduce who you are. Hi, Piotr, welcome. And then you have another box, the Q&A. It's just nearby. So please use the Q&A tool to ask your questions so that we can track them and make sure we are going to answer all of them, I mean, as much as possible. So without further delay, I will leave the floor to our first speaker. So Michele Giavini, he's a senior expert at CIC, the Italian Composting and Biogas Association. And he also runs his own consultancy, ARS Ambiente. So Michele is going to help us navigate in the world of separate collection, giving us setting the scene for us and explaining some of the lessons learned from different experiences across Europe. So Michele, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ezra, for the introduction. Let me share my screen with computer sound. Okay. Good. Let me put it full screen. Can you see it? Okay, very good. Let's start. So, as Ezra mentioned, I work as a consultant in the field of separate collection of biowaste since more than 15 years. I cooperate with the Italian Composting Association, and I am also part of some European projects, Horizon 2020 project Waste for Think, and I also cooperate with ECN and ISVA. But as you can see, there is a train down here. Why? Because last summer I decided to spend my holiday across Europe by train with my family, and I took advantage to pass by some European cities with source separation of biowaste implemented. You can see a little bit of this story here in this link, but let's see a short video with short interviews with these experts. By the way, one of them is Enzo here.
Pensi che sarà possibile implementare la raccolta differenziata dell'organico in tutta Europa?
Assolutamente sì, per me i dubbi sono scomparsi diciamo dal 1995.
Their main drive to do it is either climate change and the impact as a city or to become a circular city.
Exacto, este es uno de los grandes cambios que introduce la directiva marco residuos, es que por fin la recogida orgánica va a ser obligatorio.
Yeah. Fortunately, we have Europe still to help us.
Yeah,
and
still.
And the European policy says that by the end of 2023, across the EU, we need to have food waste collections everywhere. It's obligatory. So hopefully, London will also get its act together?
Alors, en France en général, vous avez quand même une montée en puissance de la collecte sélective des biodéchets, et notamment à travers une loi qui est sortie en 2015, qui va imposer en 2025 l'obligation du tri sélectif à la maison.
A Catalunya ja és obligatori des de fa molt de temps. Per tant, una mica aquesta directiva reforça les polítiques que s'han fet aquí, però que això l'obligació ja hi era, no? Suposo que seguirem. Una cosa és la implantació i l'altra són els resultats.
Fan una transposició directiva incorporant aspectes claus per una ràpida i eficient implantació del sistema de recollida selectiva de residus. Pot ser una realitat, si no a tot arreu, en la immensa part de les regions o dels estats, no?
Okay, so as you have seen, was the audio well? Okay, good, very good. As you've seen, positive messages from them and actual implementations already in place. I will start from one of the sentences from Marta Vila saying one thing is the implementation and another thing is results. Because as you know, the new Waste Framework Directive introduced separate collection of biowaste as obligatory from 2023. But actually it didn't put any target on biowaste. There is only the obligation. So what does it mean? Well, there is one thing to be considered. For instance, MBT, mechanical biological treatment, will not be considered recycling anymore starting from 2027. And as we know, separate collection of biowaste in Europe has been in place and is in place, not in all member states. We know for sure Germany, by the way, Italy, and other member states have it implemented since many years, but there are only a few other regions in which source separation and namely source separation of food waste is really in place effectively. Because please consider that biowaste is a commingled fraction, is made up of food waste, I mean kitchen waste, and also garden waste. So what does it mean putting in place separate collection of biowaste? This is one of the key questions. And if we look at numbers, for instance, if we look at the valuation of how much is food waste generated by households and food service, in other terms, municipal biowaste, we know from the European Project Fusions that it is around 120 kilos per capita a year. So this is the number, this is what we want to divert from landfill or incineration. By many means, for instance, home composting, prevention, for sure, food waste prevention, but this is the number to have in mind. We did an estimate as Italian Composting Association, and by now only a few member states collect as an average this high amount of food waste. The Netherlands seems to be one of those member states. But this is the national average. If we look at local data, and this is a map of Italy with micro-scale data, provinces, and their capture rate of kitchen waste, we already know that we can capture 80, 100 kilos per capita in a year. So we are close to, let's say, the theoretical maximum of 90, 100% of participation. The topic of this webinar is collection of biowaste in densely populated areas. Look at this map. I'm quite an expert in processing waste data. In this area, around 2.5 million people live. This is Lombardy, Italy, northern Italy, and the population density is really, really high, more than 2,000, 4,000 inhabitants per square kilometer. And here we have food waste collection in place. This is the capture rate of kitchen waste, and the brown label is between 60 and 100 kilos per capita. So this means that it is feasible, even in largely and densely populated areas. For sure, we have to look at cities because of many reasons, because of the increasing share of urban population, and because it's more difficult to implement successful biowaste separate collection in large cities. We did a comparison as Italian Composting Association, looking at results in some of the cities. By the way, we have here Milan, we have Ljubljana, and others, and we discovered that in most of the cities, like in Central Europe, like Munich or Hamburg or Berlin, the capture rate of food waste is really low. In other cities like Barcelona, with the current collection scheme with road containers, the capture rate is quite high, but there's a high amount of impurities. And this is a problem. I introduced this slide called the 4 times factor. This is the calculation. If you have 10% impurities in the input source, you will have roughly 40% rejects in the output. Keep this in mind, because in some of the case study we have this high amount of impurities. This is really what we don't want to have. Now we will have a quick overview looking at a survey that we implemented, like as Italian Composting Association, looking at cities that recently, I mean in the last 1 or 2 years, implemented door-to-door collection of food waste. I will go on, I will show quickly the results of Milan, because it will be explained later on by Enzo in detail. The key point here is that we have curbside collection of food waste, and our result is 103 kilos per capita of kitchen waste without garden waste. So this is really the key point and the key message. Very good quality, 5% of impurities, and a good participation. Let's look at the other case study. For instance, Madrid, they started with source separation of kitchen waste last year, November of 2017. And as far as I know, I have contacts with the municipalities and I know that they are capturing roughly 70, 80 kilos per capita a year, so it's quite a high amount. But the impurities level, as far as I know by now, and I talked last week with Mr. Cifuentes, is 23%, which is really high, to my opinion. Just some remarks. Residual waste frequency was not changed by introducing food waste collection in door-to-door areas, which is the center of Madrid, and compostable bags were not delivered in the beginning. One of the key messages, look at the face of these two interviewed people. They were actually not knowing anything about the collection of food waste. But this makes sense, because Madrid, in this sense, was kind of pioneer with respect of other municipalities in the rest of Spain, because in that area, source separation of food waste was not in place. In Barcelona, on the contrary, biowaste separation was in place since more than 10 years with this scheme, road containers, that in a limited area of a district in Sarrià was changed in favor of a door-to-door collection schemes. And we discovered that the capture rate increased up to 41 kilos per capita in year. Not that much, but there is a kind of border effect due to the old road containers in place in the rest of the district. A key note here is the very high quality of food waste collected. With the new scheme, just 2% impurity compared to the 14 or even 20% impurity that was in place before. In Copenhagen, food waste collection has been in place and has been implemented since last year. In their case, again, the scheme is door-to-door, so it's quite interesting, and they have also pay-as-you-throw in place. It's a volume-based pay-as-you-throw. Since the beginning, the system is stated as voluntary to some extent, in the sense that the citizen can unsubscribe from the system. Capture rate by now is 26 kilos per capita in a year. I just got the figure about impurities, which is 8% from the municipality of Copenhagen. And they are committed and willing to extend and improve. Look at the frequency of the collection. This is one of the other important factors. Once per week, residual waste. Once every 2 weeks, food waste. Compared to, for instance, the city of Madrid, 4 times a week residual waste and 4 times a week food waste. Geneva, in Switzerland, they have biowaste collection in place in many years, but they decided to improve this collection by pushing for higher quantities of food waste. And they decided to do this by delivering the kitchen caddy and compostable bags to more than 200,000 people. And they experienced a 30% increase in participation, but actually on average, their capture rate is 25 kilos per capita an year. In Paris, this is another new implementation of last year. In the end of 2017, in 2 districts, they introduced this food waste collection door to door on 130,000 people. In this case, capture rate is quite low or very low, 6 kilo per capita in year, because they tried to look for quality and to identify, as far as I know and as far as I understand, to identify the best committed buildings to have this collection in place. They even do a lot of controls. Look at the picture here. They leave a sticker on the bin if there is contamination in your food waste collected. A final analysis that I like to do in this case is what I call the surrounding effect. Paris started with food waste collection with basically anyone else doing this around the municipality, and this is the case also for Madrid. What does this mean? Look at the case of Milan. This is Lombardy, year 2010. Municipalities that had food waste collection in place since many years around this white spot that was the city of Milan. So in a sense, citizens were prepared to some extent to the introduction of this new collection that happened in 2014. And so that's why probably citizens reacted very well, and they reached 100 kilos per capita in a year since the beginning, since the very, very beginning. As a final comparison, the population trial area in all of these case studies is quite large. So even population density is very high, more than 10 or 20,000 inhabitants per square kilometer. But the results show the influence of these different factors. Percentage of impurities, the frequency of residual waste, the promotion or not of compostable bags, the effect of having past experiences in the cities, in the city itself, or in other surrounding municipalities. These are the key aspects to keep in mind. My final conclusion as lesson learned is that food waste collection is possible even in large cities with a high population density and even with a door-to-door scheme. The pioneer areas seem to have lower results, and in areas surrounded by experienced municipalities we have higher and quicker results. The door-to-door scheme with kitchen caddy and compostable bags is the most favored option in order to achieve a high quality and quantity, but there is a high importance of campaigns to roll out during the implementation and to be repeated from time to time. I would like to say that space from brown bins in high-rise building can always be found. The introduction of food waste collection is just something that is really not as intensive as, for instance, light packaging or fraction of waste that has a higher volume. Thanks to anyone that gave me information, specifically to my contacts in the municipality, and I'm available for your Q&A time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michele. There's a couple of questions. One of them from Sarah Risch. She's asking, do you also take into account food waste prevention? That was one of her points, because the previous one was related to, did you evaluate the figures with a sorting analysis of residual waste?
Yeah, very good. Well, about food waste prevention, yes, definitely. This is an indirect measurement that we do by summing precisely the food waste that is captured and the food waste that is left in residual waste. I have to admit that in the case of Milan, there is basically no reduction in food waste generation overall, because not a lot of campaigns has been implemented. But I would like to stress on the fact that if we take into consideration food waste prevention, we have to keep in mind these 120 kilos generated. So the effect of these campaigns should be effective enough in order to subtract from this 120 at least 10 or 20 kilos per capita, or even more if it's possible. The objective of halving food waste by 2030 and so on means 60 kilos per capita. So this is exactly one of the key considerations. We have to reduce biowaste in residual waste up to 5 or even 10 kilos per capita a year. This is the figure we have to have in mind. And we can do this by food waste prevention, by home composting, why not? But this should not be an excuse. We have to collect what is rest of the biowaste, because otherwise it will end up in landfill or incineration.
Thank you very much. I'm going to take another clarification question. Pavel is asking, so you're providing the data in kilograms, but in some countries, because countries have different waste generation, so what is the capture rate of bio-waste?
The capture rate, if I understand correctly the question, is measured in kilos per capita a year, because we assume that the generation, like a general assumption, is always 120 kilos per capita across Europe. This is actually not the case in many member states, because, for instance, in Mediterranean region, we have higher generation of bio-waste. We reach 150, even more kilos per capita a year. So, well, the kilos per capita a year is an indicator of what is the maximum possible diversion of food waste from landfill and incineration. For sure, another way of measuring it should be probably percentage of food waste that is captured or diverted from landfill and incineration. It's just a matter of seeing the indicator from another point of view.
Thank you, Michele. There are some more questions, but I'll keep them for the rest of the conversation.
Okay.
Thank you very much. We're now moving to Janko Kramžar. So Janko is the director of the public company Snaga, which is the largest waste management company in Slovenia. And Janko is going to explain us in detail the experience of Snaga. Janko?
Thank you. Let me share my presentation. Okay, so, hello everybody. I'm an economist by training. I have been working in different areas in private and public sector, and for more than 15 years, I'm here with the company Snaga. Well, few words about Slovenia. Slovenia is a small country, only 2 million inhabitants. Capital city is Ljubljana, around 300,000 inhabitants, and our company is one of the biggest in Slovenia, but in European area, well, we are not so big. Nevertheless, around 40 million turnover and 600 employees. We are owned by the city of Ljubljana and nearby municipalities. So when we are speaking about waste collection system and waste collection in Slovenia and in Ljubljana, I think it's important that we always stress that there are basically 4 pillars of effective waste management. This is legislation, good service, communication, and control mechanism. Probably in this order, starting with the legislation and then service and communication together, and in the end, probably the control mechanism. If you start with inspection and control mechanism, probably you will get the answers that you want to earn money, additional money with waste management. So Speaking about legislation in Slovenia, I have to add something to the Mikel presentation, because Slovenia is not in the light green area, but it's effectively introduced all necessary legislation measures, starting in the national legislation, where there are important two decrees on biodegradable kitchen waste and garden waste, and decree on treatment of biodegradable waste. And this legislation is then transposed also to the municipal level when there is more this operative things in this ordinance, including the frequency, the standards, and so on and so forth. So this concludes the legislation part, and now with the collection system, let me just inform you that when starting this part in Ljubljana, more than 90% of waste ended on landfill, and now the percentage of landfill waste is less than 10%. So the percentage just changed in the opposite way. We started in 2002 with ecological sites, and in 2006, so more than 10 years ago, we introduced separate collection of biowaste in door-to-door manner. So all the households, they got container for biowaste in addition to the container of residual waste. In addition to that, we give for free to the households small bins, bio bins, which they can use in their kitchens. And for the purpose of more bio waste that can be placed in the containers, they can also use special bags for the bio waste. And okay, in the center of the city we have specific system, underground containers. So, and in 2013 we upgraded our waste collection system in order that all households has 4 bins for separate collection, so bio waste, packaging waste, and paper. At that time, at 2013, what was also important, we shifted the frequency of collection of residual waste. So if in the beginning we have 1 week or twice a week or even more times a week collection of residual waste, we shifted from once a week to once 3 weeks, and replace it with the emptying of separate collection materials. So here it is stated that we empty bio waste once a week, and in the winter weeks once in 2 weeks. And our citizens can also put their garden primary waste in waste collection centers. So, and the result is that in 2017 we separately collected 67% of waste, which puts Ljubljana in the first place among the EU capital cities. And these are the figures about kilos and percentage. And here I agree with, I think, Piotr, who said that not only the absolute figures, but also the percentage. It's important, as we calculated around 2/3 of biowaste get generated. We now we are now collecting separately. And this is the graph which shows that without separate collection of biowaste, you cannot reach the high overall separate collection rates in whatever area you are starting with separate collection. So this is something that it's not optional, but it's must. Just 2 words about what to do with so separate collected waste. There are basically 2 options, aerobic or anaerobic fermentation. In our waste treatment plant, we use the anaerobic fermentation, and one of byproducts is also the compost of first quality, which can be used for production of food. And this year we will start to sell this compost in this bag that you see in this slide. Okay, we are charging in accordance to the volume and emptying rate of basically residual waste. So we are promoting our citizens to put more materials in containers for separate collection, so they can decrease their bills. And our average invoice, this probably is interesting, is €8 per month. This amount summarize all the service of our company, so providing the containers, collection and separate collection, bulky waste collection, dangerous waste collection, treatment and landfilling. And frankly speaking, in last year we have problem because this is less than 100 years per household and we believe that these are really low numbers. And yes, in 2014 and 2015, due to excellent results in separate collection, we actually gave back some of money to our citizens, and this was very good accepted by them. So if I spoke about legislation and good service, why good service? Because the service cannot be the excuse for our citizens not to collect separately. Now down to communication, which there is only one rule about the communication. There is never enough of communication. So before you start the separate collection and after that, there is a lot of things to do. So one of the important things is to collaborate with the media to gain their trust, because in the beginning we were just money makers in waste management, especially when we also run the landfill. The general idea was that Snaga is the company who is living by collecting and landfill waste, and when we shifted this opinion in the general media, in the main media, then we became somehow a partner, and now there is a lot more easier to work with them. Okay, we for sure use also social media. We are trying to reach our citizens with magazines in which we try to not only promote but to sell the stories, to make this communication interesting to them. And yes, if they are not disposing their waste properly, we also use these stickers or these notifications to tell them that they can improve what they are doing. We enforced our support and assistance center during this year. This is also very important, especially when you are introducing changes. One of the interesting things is when we introduce changes, the number of contacts rose by 3 times. So we had to get additional people in our assistance center. And yes, we work with our children in kindergartens, primary schools. Last year we started with free giving for free our compost to our citizens. We thought that this will take a month to get rid of all our compost. In less than 1 week, our citizens took all our compost that was available at that time. And as far as communication is concerned, I strongly believe that we can win at that time when our citizens are on our sides too. And this is one of the examples in one of our block of house. When we left the notice in the white paper that they were doing wrongly with some part of the waste, some of the some of the citizens add this additional notice. In this notice, it is said that we in Snaga can once a year took your bulky waste for free, and other ways too, and more. It's on our website, and please just call the Snaga and not put your waste in front of your door. So I think that these messages and the messages when people starting to contact the Snaga and say what you will do with those who are not separate collecting their waste in proper manner, then you are winning. Before you are alone and inspectors probably in your side. So this is all from my side. The general message would be that separate collection of biowaste, it's not something special. You cannot, let's say, wait and discuss whether this is feasible or not, because there are so much cities that has done this, and it is just time for all to start and go. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Janko. Thank you. We have a couple of questions, clarification questions for you, and then some others will be also interesting for all the speakers. Simona Leroux is asking what collection tool, the vented kitchen caddy, compostable plastic bags, what did you use, what did you distribute to the families?
Okay, as I said, basically the collection is the collection system is door-to-door system in the brown containers. In addition to that, we are offering for free those small containers that citizens can use in their kitchens or in their houses, and this is all. But we know that there are also other types of collection, like in bags, like in generally small bins. And this is only the proof that all types of collection system works. You must just choose the type that probably fit the best to your city or to your environment, and then just go. It is not the matter whether one type is better than the other type. All types of collection are working.
Thank you. There's another question that relates quite a lot to your communication efforts, and you mentioned that the only true thing with communication is that it's never enough. Sarah Rich is asking, how do you motivate citizens to keep their bio-waste, especially in high-rise buildings, for a few days or maybe a full week? So how did it work for you beyond the communications, or were there some specific actions that really helped to motivate citizens?
So first of all, in the beginning, our communication was very basic. What should go in what container? Because there were a lot of questions of certain parts of waste, what should go in which container. And this took, let's say, 3 or 5 years. At that point, we finished, because who was willing to listen to us know what is going to which container. And at that point, we started with much more sophisticated communication, as I mentioned, to sell the stories to them. We have to appeal to our citizens, and stories like, okay, the general story is that there are not other peoples which are polluting our planet, but we are those people, and we have to change not only our waste management habits, but also living habits, asking ourselves whether this consumption, more and more buying things, is really something that makes us happy. And then there is a path. You cannot reach the results overnight. There is a combination also of the service. I mentioned that we shifted the frequency, and then, if it's possible, also the financial contribution, which in 2014 and 2015 was very well accepted. So, combination of all efforts, and when you get the people behind you, as I mentioned, you won the battle.
Thank you very much. I think this question is also very interesting, and I would expect Enzo and Michele to complete it after in the final conversation part. Thank you very much, Janko. We're moving to Enzo Tavolino. So Enzo is a technical expert and researcher at the Scuola Agraria del Parco di Monza in Italy, and he's also the chair of the scientific committee at RCERO. And Enzo is going to give us some insights in the Milan experience. Enzo, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ezra, and it's my pleasure after two such impressive presentations, really impressive presentations. I will try to put some icing on the cake because we know and we had plenty of evidence that implementing separate collection, let alone in a densely populated area, takes certainly the good operational design, much of the commitment, a good communication with people. But we also think it takes confidence. We need to make people confident that this may be done also in densely populated areas. So I will try to contribute also and above all from this side. Let me share my screen. Let me know when the screen is visible. I think you can see my screen right now.
Yes.
To start with, yeah, you can see a skyline from Milan. The skyline in Milan was totally renovated lately because it was the host city for Expo 2015, the big event. It hosted 21 million people coming from all over the world. And by the way, they achieved the 72% separate collection, thanks above all to good management of the organics. But we will not have time to discuss it today. It's a very densely populated area, between 7,000 and 8,000 persons per square kilometer. And so it's one of the most populated areas in Europe. Let me also acknowledge some input, some precious contribution by AMSA, which is the public waste management company dealing with waste in Milan. Okay, these are the key numbers from Milan. Milan totals a population of almost 1.4 million people. There's 800,000 commuters a day. And this is part of the reason why the captures in kilograms per person in Milan are comparatively high, because there's people who are not living in Milan, but they get at least one meal a day in Milan. And this is collected through the route which is serving all the so-called large producers. Restaurants, canteens, hotels, pizza shops, and so on and so forth. And also 11 million tourists. So it's a rather complicated situation, as many cities across Europe are. But the results are, it's already at 60% and already planning next steps to get to 70, 80% separate collection. And the capture of food scraps is more than 100 kilograms per inhabitant and year. if we relate back to the slide which was already shown by Michele, which is the maximum theoretical potential that was calculated through a European survey, namely 113 kilograms per inhabitant and year, this is basically around 90% of the maximum theoretical potential which is captured in Milan, in a city which is totaling by far more than 1 million inhabitants. Also, we already gave evidence that this is viable in densely populated areas. Actually, let me try and share with you a paradox. This is a map of region Lombardy. It's the most populated region in Italy. It totals a population of some 10 million inhabitants. And as you can see, those municipalities which are in the densely populated areas, basically all of them are doing separate collection of the organics. The blank areas, which are the northernmost and the southernmost area in the region, are the mountain areas, because it makes little sense, if any, to implement separate collection of biowaste there. It makes much more sense to promote home composting in the mountain areas with sparsely populated areas. But all the densely populated areas, they are separating food scraps. The scheme in Milan was rolled out in 4 steps. The city was divided in 4 areas. The first one was served starting in November 2012. The second one in June 2013. The third one in December 2013. And the fourth one in June 2014. There are 2 main takes I want to share with you from this slide. First of all, each and every area was totaling a population of 350,000 people. And all of them, they were getting into the city center. They were starting from the suburbs and getting into the city center. Just to show it was feasible everywhere, not only in the more sparsely populated outskirts, but also in the city center. The second take is it could not be done overnight, but it didn't take ages either. In 1.5 years, the city was totally covered by the scheme. The achievements, these have already been beautifully discussed by Michele. Let me draw your attention to the fact that blending the captures from households and from large producers, and considering also the amounts of food scraps which are left behind in residual waste, we have got an overall capture of residual waste which is roughly 87%. Only 13% of food scraps have not been captured by the system. So this is a more than satisfactory capture rate. How comes it was possible? Let me share with you a fundamental concept. We always have to consider that waste is like water. It always flows the easiest way. So we just have to set the system in a way that makes waste flow the most appropriate direction. And the key tools to do that are tools for user friendliness of the system. We have to make the system comfortable, and we also have to work on collection frequency. Certainly, the frequency for collection of food scraps has to be the highest frequency of all the waste streams, because it's the stinky stuff. But let me share with you a little bit the discussion on the proper tools in order to make the system user-friendly. In Milan and in general, in Lombardy and in all the municipalities doing separate collection of food scraps in Italy, we provided households with kitchen caddies. They are vented because we use the transpirability of the system in order to evaporate excess water, which is not only good for the households, but also for the municipalities. So they will deliver some 15–20% less weight to composting sites. And also the composting sites themselves, they are happy because they have got more organic matter to be turned into compost and less water to be evaporated. And also there was the fundamental role of the compostable bags. The compostable bags have to be certified fully compostable, and they have to meet the relevant European standard, which is in place since 2002, EN 13432, which is the relevant standard for compostability of packaging. This was the starter kit, kitchen caddy per each family, 25 compostable bags, which refers to 6 months of collection with 2 collections a week. And for the high-rise buildings, a 120 liters cart. This is the common cart where the compostable bag with food scraps goes as soon as it's full with food scraps. But for those families living in smaller houses with a garden, it's a small percentage in Milan, roughly 10% of the population. We gave them a smaller bucket, not a big cart, so that we may exploit the much less time which is needed for manual collection of the buckets instead of mechanical loading of a cart. And this means saving money and saving time and saving money. The system is comparatively easy. There are 5 streams, and as you can see, the collection frequency for the brown container is twice a week. As Michele already mentioned in the Q&As, there is a dedicated collection round for the large producers, which may be more frequent, even daily, if they so ask. But for the families, it's twice a week, and that's sufficient in order to make them satisfied with the system. Of course, awareness campaigns were particularly important. There was also a targeted campaign for various ethnic communities, and this is of utmost importance in a large city. You can see the instructions were translated in 10 languages, and there was a delivery one-to-one with the relationship with foreigners in their own communities in order to let them feel in a friendly atmosphere, everybody sharing a common challenge for separate collection. But this is a chart I always take with me. These reports on the ethnic groups living in Milan and the nations they come from. So if 4,000 and more Filipinos are doing separate collection in Milan, 35,000 Egyptians or 14,000 Romanians, 8,000 Ukrainians, they are doing separate collection in Milan. It means this is feasible everywhere. What we say is it is the organizational context that triggers the proper behavior by people. And if you provide them with a properly designed and properly run system for separate collection, they will behave. This is the evolution of separate collection in Milan in the last 25 years or so. And as you can see, the big leap forward was after introduction of the collection for organics from households. At the latest numbers, it was roughly around 60%, which is already good. But not only the diversion of food scraps, another key performance indicator is the purity of food scraps. The average amount of non-compostable materials is 3.4%, with the worst case being 5%, which makes it compatible with low-tech and not particularly complicated systems for refining of biowaste at composting sites. But also, of course, we are running customer satisfaction analysis in order to keep our ears on the ground. And the percentage of supportive people reported that first customer satisfaction analysis was 79% in 2013. But there is a learning curve because this percentage grew to 92% in the second one in May 2015. So it means that by far, the vast majority of people, they are supportive and they are happy with the system. Of course, during the first weeks, you may expect the ones who are not happy to send letters, to release interviews to the local media, but please be confident and be aware that by far the vast majority of the people, they are the silent majority who are supportive to the system. So listen to the ones who are not happy in order to improve the system, but keep the system rolling, because we know that by far most of the people, they wanted the system to be run. This is why Milan is becoming also a reference example for many other cities around the world. This is a high-level delegation from the city of New York. New York has got a program, an ongoing program to diffuse separate collection of the organics throughout the city in the context of their Zero Waste 2030 program. And they have taken Milan as one reference example in order to optimize the system. And the European Commissioner Vella himself mentioned Milan and other Italian municipalities as living examples of the operational implementations of the principles tabled in the circular economy package. Because once we get the organics out everything related to the circular economy agenda becomes way easier, much easier than when we leave the organics inside mixed garbage. Okay, so we are at the end. We are always happy, but never satisfied. Milan is already planning the next steps. They want to reduce the number of road baskets because there are still 3 to 5% of recyclables which end up in the road baskets. And so reducing the number, they will further increase the amount of recyclables, be it paper, glass, metals, and so on and so forth. Reducing the collection runs for residual waste from twice a week to once a week because the organics have been taken out. The percentage of organics in residual waste is very, very low, and therefore the collection frequency for residual waste may be further decreased. And then also plans to implement pay-as-you-throw as a financial incentive for better separation of materials. With that being done, I'm done and happy to collect your questions.
Thank you very much, Enzo, and thank you for this point that you mentioned about once we went through the question of bio-waste, we then actually can really implement the rest of the circular economy, and that's why we really wanted to have this webinar today. There are a few questions, actually 2 or 3 questions that relate to the compostable bags. I know that you answered already one of them, but I think it's also good to maybe clarify here what we mean. So there's a question, Ljubljana from Paris, I believe, is asking what's the percentage of plastic in compostable bags. So I think it will be used in Italy. It would be good to re-explain what are the compostable bags. There's also another question that relates to this as well, saying, isn't there any issue in promoting such bags, knowing that they are also different use? And there was also a question from Thomas calling, that is connecting very much to this as well. Are the bioplastic fine packaging also ending up in this type of collection? So I think it would be great to have a clarification on our position and what it means exactly.
Yeah, these are very good questions and help me clarify a few fundamental issues also vis-a-vis what is our position on the plastic issue as a whole, because we do not consider biodegradable and compostable plastics to be the solution to the plastic problem. They are just a tool in order to optimize separate collection of the organics. So we are not supported to a widespread application of compostable plastics, including all types of plastics packaging. And this replies to the question by my friend Thomas Colin, whom I know since a very long time. Concerning the bio bags, in Italy, they have been used since the early stages. We promoted a separate collection of the organics starting in 1993. And it's the Italian Composting Association that's the network of all the compost and anaerobic digestion sites. They themselves, they are promoting the compostable bags because they know that once the compostable bags are being used, the captures are maximized, and above all, the quality is much better. Otherwise, people, they tend to use themselves the traditional plastic bags. That's it. If you want them to collect meat and fish, you have to provide them with something that makes the system comfortable, which causes no yuck, and the compostable bags are the perfect tool in order to have it. The second question was related to the percentage of plastics in compostable plastics. Actually, there is no plastic in them, unless you were referring to oxo-degradables, which are about to be banned from Europe, and we are very, very supportive to banning oxo-degradables, because the oxo-degradables, they didn't have much success across Europe, only in United Kingdom, basically. And they are basically made of polyethylene with a few biodegradable fillers. They do not meet European standards for compostability, EN 13432. And they basically do not degrade, they just fragment into smaller and smaller pieces, which leads to the problem with microplastics. Whereas the compostable bags, fully in line with European standard EN 13432, they're fully compostable. There's plenty of research out there showing both in lab tests and field trials the full compostability. But once again, let me remark, we are not for a widespread application of compostable bags. We are only consider them as a tool in connection with separate collection of the organics. This is why I personally, and also the Italian Composting Association, as far as I know, I tend not to be so much supportive to a widespread application of compostable plastics as a replacement of plastic packaging. Certainly the way forward for the future when it comes to plastic packaging will be reduction, redesign for durability, reusability, and replacement by other types of packaging.
Thank you very much, Janko, for this very neat clarification. And there's a question that's related to this. And Monica, I'm sorry for the family name. I'm going to mispronounce it, or just skip the family name. She's asking, so is it better to put food in the organic bin in compostable bags instead of putting them without anything? And I think you can clarify why it's needed, why the bags are needed.
Maybe.
Or Michele, yeah?
Oh, yes, if I may chip in this question, because as Italian Composting Association, we did a lot of waste composition analysis, and we discovered we have some interesting outcomes. For instance, one thing is that, well, definitely if you put organics without bag, you have lower participation by citizen. Actually, we don't have the scheme in place here in Italy. It's more common like in Central Europe, where kitchen waste is collected commingled with garden waste. In that case, without compostable bags. But we discovered that the use of a clean tool like the bag, the compostable bag, gives you the sense of tidiness and easiness, convenience. So citizens do participate. Also, we discovered, for instance, that if you give citizens a polyethylene bag, because in some periods it was done here in Italy before the ban on plastic bags for collection of organics. If you give them a polyethylene bag, they will think about plastics. And so they may think about putting dirty plastics contaminated with food waste to some extent in food waste collection, because they say, well, the bag itself is polyethylene, why not? On the contrary, if you gave them a compostable bags, they think about compostability and not throwing impurity in the bio-waste bin. This is the key in our analysis.
Thank you very much, Michele. Thank you for the input. There are a couple of questions that I think is interesting for all of you, but I wanted to first give the chance to Janko to reply. There was a question from Rosaria Kifari that was asking about the residual 10% that is going to landfill. And the question was, which treatment do you have then in Slovenia for this 10%?
Yeah, when I spoke about 10%, that's now it's going to the landfill. It is 10% of all municipal waste that we are collecting. So part of this, was diverted from the landfill by separate collection, obviously, and part of this, the residual waste, now it's going through the waste treatment plant. And this 10% is that practically those inert materials that are going to the landfill. And then there was additional question, I think, about technology or
the waste management companies. So someone asked, it was Tosca Ballerini who was asked, is there a difference among public waste management companies and private waste management companies in the success rates? Which I think is an interesting question, but Janko, you wanted to say a couple.
Well, it's an interesting question, and I have two answers to this. Firstly, I strongly believe that we people that now currently are working in public companies are not less smart, are not more stupid than people that are working in private companies. So my general belief is that public and private companies can operate in certain fields, bad, good, or excellent. And to this question about successful separate collection, I really don't recall any analysis that would prove either of conclusions, whether the private or public company can be more successful. To me, bottom line, all lies on the people that are running the company.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Janko. I think all unmute yourself because the next questions are interesting for the few of you. There's Anne-Fleur Hugh, who has a question about accountability. So, and it was a very similar question from another participant. So how do you do in high-rise building? What are the control mechanisms? And there was again another comment saying that how do we charge for collective building? Because some of the municipalities refuse to implement such separate collection, saying that's going to be impossible to charge.
So maybe the question is more related to the pay-as-you-throw scheme. So maybe Janko, you could start telling us about what you do in Ljubljana.
Okay. Yes. So I believe that there are two options. If you can introduce pay-as-you-throw scheme in the block buildings in a way that you can identify every household within the block and charge them, this is one way, and this could be done also. There are techniques. For the time being, in Ljubljana, we didn't introduce this system because, on the other hand, it's also demanding on resources. I strongly believe that living in a block of flats brings to you some advantages and some responsibilities. In our case, the advantage of living in the block of flats is that you pay less in general for the waste management that you are paying in individual houses. So this is the advantage. The disadvantage is that you are somehow depending also on other people's what they are doing. In the best way to control, this was the question, is that there is some way of collective responsibility and collective control within the block of house. So there are examples when people living in such apartments are controlling other people which are also living, telling them what they are doing wrong in waste management, and I believe that this is the other way to achieve, let's say, control mechanism in those apartment buildings. And this is the way how currently we are doing in Ljubljana. Is this satisfied your question?
It is true that, related to this question, it is true that the behavior in high-rise building or in collective buildings has to be taken in consideration because, for instance, in Milan, they are fining the building.
Yeah.
Michele, you're frozen. We can't hear you. Yeah.
Giving fines to the building because of, no?
Yeah, can you restart? Sorry.
Okay, yeah. I was just saying that, yeah, in Milan we have collective buildings again, and they are receiving fines because of their low participation or low quality in separate collection. And this fine is quite low, let's say 50 euros, but it has a high psychological effect. So it is being discussed during the building meetings with the residents. And so anyone is a little bit sensitized in order to improve their separate collection. For sure, pay-as-you-throw, strictly speaking, I mean individual pay-as-you-throw in collective building is not such easy. It can be done, most probably not in very, very large cities. We know from the past webinar, we have good examples from Zero Waste Europe. But yeah, it is a matter of having people involved about their task. I mean, high quality means that they are doing something. They have to see the benefit, and they should not be only economic. They should be visible. I mean, in some cities, for instance, also in Milan, they do the compost giveaway days, like in Ljubljana. We have seen a good example from Janko. So this is the key, having people involved in the sense of getting a feedback also about the final destination. If you live in a large city and you don't have a composting facility nearby, you have to be sensitized about where is the plant, what is the output, where is the compost applied to, and so on.
Thank you very much, Michele. Enzo, do you want to add anything on this? We have more questions for you.
Yes. Always consider probably the key slide in my presentation was the one with the cascades. You know, always remember that waste flows the easiest way. So since the waste management service is providing people with a higher collection frequency for organics than for other materials, if they refuse collecting your bio-waste because it's full with impurities, so it will not be so comfortable for the high-rise building, and therefore there will be mutual communication amongst the households. I live myself in a block of flats, and it happened once, and of course, the first key message to everybody was, please behave, because we can't afford having the bio-waste retained for longer than 3 or 4 or 5 days, something like that. So there's anyway always a kind of shared responsibility when it comes to the economic incentives, but this is pretty much as it happens with gas, with energy, with water in the blocks of flats. Anyway, there are some systems which may be implemented in order to have pay-as-you-throw, rewarding the single household in a block of flats. But this would be matter for other webinars, and we would need much more time to discuss it.
Thank you, Enzo. We have a list of very, very interesting and I would say meaty questions that are coming, and we have 15 minutes left. I wanted maybe, there's the last question is from Piotr. And it connects quite well with another question from one of the participants who was asking, you know, the benefits of the environmental benefits of separate collection and the use of trucks for collection. And one of the comments, the question from Piotr was to say, so the directive speaks about bio-waste is either separated and recycled at source or is collected separately. So this includes community composting. So what is our, if we could say, what is the preference between the separate collection or the community composting? And his question was to say, is there any risk that one hamper, I mean, if that they hamper one another? So I think we have a very clear position on community composting and separate collection of bio-waste. And Enzo and maybe Michele.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Michele, you muted yourself.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
So I start first.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, Enzo go first.
Of course, we've always been supported. I've been teaching myself to literally 100,000 people doing home composting, community composting, and so on and so forth. However, consider in a city like Rome, and Rome is more sparsely populated than Milan, but in a city like Rome, they are planning 100 community composting sites, which is quite a lot. But this will only be able to manage some 2,000 tons bio-waste a day, whereas their total foreseen capture is around 400,000 tons. So basically, there is no fight between community composting and separate collection. They have to supplement each other. We are also teaching people doing composting in the balcony in cities as Genoa, and we convinced 1,500 lot in a big city, but it's a trivial number in the total tonnage of bio-waste in the city. So basically, there is no one-stop shop when it comes to bio-waste, above all in the cities. Much as in the villages, home composting and community composting may do the job totally. Quite often, most of the times in the big cities, you have to consider complementing each other. However, if I may, something is related to also the optimization of the fleet of vehicles. Exactly. And this is one more reason why we collect only food scraps by themselves without commingled collection with garden waste. Because thanks to the much higher bulk density of food scraps, we may use small, cheap, open lorries with no compaction, and they use much less fuel. than the bigger packer trucks. But this is why we keep focused only on what we call bespoke food waste collection, which leads to overall operational and economic optimization of the system, besides also the environmental benefit of less fuel for collection.
Again, a very quick clarification about the coexistence of community composting and separate collection of biowaste. Please have in mind numbers, have in mind capture rates. We have very good case studies like, you know, Besançon or the plan in place in Pontevedra, Galicia. But please have in mind how much we are capturing. If you are capturing like 60, 80 kilos per capita a year with this scheme, then you can avoid source separation of food waste with door-to-door. But if you're only capturing 10 or 20 kilos per capita, this means that there's still another 100 kilos going to landfill. So please keep this in mind. This is the number we have. So they can coexist, but in order to give up the introduction of door-to-door collection because we have community composting, think it twice, and also consider about the transportation and the environmental life cycle assessment, for instance. Consider that the impact of a large truck delivering food waste not exactly close to you, but I don't know, 50 kilometers or even 100 kilometers is not so high compared as the impact of biowaste, again, sent to landfill. The impact of biowaste landfilled is enormous and is by far higher than the impact of door-to-door collection, any kind of truck, especially if you optimize the scheme. Again.
Thank you. Enzo, wanted to add something?
No, just a final remark, because there was a comment by the French lady whom I thank so much, because she says it's intriguing to have so many examples coming from Italy because they may sound convincing from the southern part of France. In order to make her even more confident, one of the most intriguing situations in France when it comes to separate collection of food scraps is becoming Corse. And just because Corse is right in front of Sardinia, and so it's borrowing good examples from Sardinia. But Corse, really in Calvi, which is one of the largest cities in Corse, they are already at very high recycling rates thanks to the fact that they have rolled out separate collection of the food scraps. So be confident.
Thank you, Enzo. There's a couple of questions on the technology in a way, and I think Michele, you wanted to answer to, is it possible to weight single entry in the bin with, you know, a card for residents or something?
Okay, now okay. Again, the issue of having identification, measure, volume, weigh, well, it's quite related to the pay-as-you-throw scheme, not only to pay-as-you-throw, so I wouldn't go into detail. There is also a question from Gemma, hi Gemma, about the use of road containers and locked identification container as an alternative model compared to the door-to-door scheme, especially for biowaste. Yes, they can be a tool. They can be a tool, but again, please consider first if curbside collection is really not possible. Because we discovered in many situations that in the end, if you do it well, you can also implement door-to-door curbside collection. If you cannot, there is technology. Yeah, one way is to give, well, let's have the system voluntary. So you give a card to citizens who just want to participate. So it's a voluntary scheme. They will be motivated and they will be delivering food waste with high quality. But again, we have to have in mind capture rates. So I insist on this fact. We want to capture 60 to 100 kilos per capita, or even better, prevent it with composting or food waste prevention. If not, if you have a very complicated scheme in place just to capture 10 kilos per capita a year of biowaste, please forget about it.
Yes, certainly one of the key performance indicators to be kept in mind is the percentage of organics and the amount of organics and residual waste. And this has been stressed by all the three speakers. Always keep it in mind.
Thank you, Enzo. There's a question for you and Janko from Rosaria. So which is the final waste percentage at the end of biowaste treatment. I think we discussed a bit about this, but it's also important. In her question, she mentioned it is important since it is linked with the percentage of impurities entering in the biowaste treatment. So Enzo and maybe Janko, yeah, please.
Well, it's less than 5%, so this is not actually a problem when we treat the separately collected biowaste. But just to add a comment on one of the previous questions, asking whether home composting and separate collection is fighting on each other. I agree with my colleagues. I would like just to add one thing about the way of treatment. When we are speaking about aerobic treatment, then it's a different thing that when we are speaking about anaerobic treatment. One thing is that anaerobic treatment solves also the climate change problems because obviously it's closed system and in aerobic treatment there are things that are going into the air. So when putting in this perspective, obviously individual composting is aerobic treatment. So then, yes, we should take into the consideration also this question and add it to all other things like distance, whether it's feasible from environmental point to go with the truck and collect the biowaste and then treat it away. But basically, I believe that anaerobic treatment has advantage against the aerobic treatment. And regarding trucks, well, there is a big initiative to shift in fuel trucks. So in Ljubljana are now oriented in buying CNG driven trucks and yes, probably we will also introduce electric driven trucks in future. So this environmental impact of collection should decrease in the future.
Thank you. Enzo?
Now, going back to the issue of the so-called contraries, impurities in the collected biowaste and how they relate to the final rejects from the final output in composting sites. This was also beautifully remarked by Michele during his presentation. There is what we call the dragging effect. It is a multiplier, which means if you have got a certain amount of impurities in your biowaste, this will be multiplied times 3 or times 4 in the amount of rejects, because along with the impurities, much of the potentially compostable organics go away from the system during primary screening, final refining, and so on and so forth. This is why we also want to consider the quality of collected biowaste as one of the key performance indicators. But here I may only pick and endorse what Janko just said. We are far below 5% impurities in biowaste, and this makes the system particularly effective.
Thank you very much. We're almost over with the time. There were a couple of comments that I wanted to mention. Sophie Tromboni said that we talked a lot about landfilling, but indeed, in many countries, incineration with energy recovery is increasingly popular, and it makes it even more difficult for biowaste collection to promote biowaste collection. And I think we're all clear with this. There was a comment, a question that I found interesting from Monika Grisnik, who was saying, do you also promote less food waste? I've heard you all saying this, but the question was, because it also means more business to have food waste. And I believe there's, maybe it's interesting for Janko to explain why as a waste management company, you actually want to have less food waste.
Yes, thank you for that question. I didn't mention our promotion action in my presentation, but yes, we are engaging in also reducing food waste. In the end, prevention and reduction are the top priorities, and there are different actions which Snaga entered. For instance, we gave up for free small containers for food for the people that are going to the restaurant, and then they can ask for the food they cannot eat it at that time to take it home. And additional, and the answer to your question, why as a waste management company we are doing this? Yes, someone could argue that we are shooting our own business. But there are two questions. Firstly, I strongly believe that we are not going to our daily job only to earn money. Probably a big portion of us also want to do something good, not only for ourselves, but also for the community. And on the other hand, maybe you recall what I explained during my presentation, that building confidence with the media is very important, and with the NGOs and other stakeholders. And such actions can help us and did help us to build that confidence. So also from the point of view of the company, it's important.
Thank you, Janko. Thank you very much. The time is over. I wanted to answer to Tosca Ballerini, who asked if we had any references for anaerobic and aerobic treatment and impacts on climate change. Yes, we're going to add the documents thanks to Enzo. Thank you very much. And yeah, Enzo?
Tosca has got my contacts, and so she may call me and we may have extended talks. I can flood her with information, of course.
Okay, and I think we'll be happy also to share with the other participants. Thank you very much to the three of you. Thank you for your presentations and the questions, the Q&A. Thank you to all the participants for the questions as well. I wanted to thank also Sartori Ambiente, who kindly supported us and help us bring this webinar together. So thank you very much to them. I wanted to mention a couple of things. We have a newsletter dedicated to cities, and I think someone had a question of how are we going to do, because no one is going to respect the EU law. Well, first, by sharing this knowledge to the municipalities and making sure that they have access to it. So please sign up for the newsletter and for the next webinar. I also wanted to mention that we have this free webinars in September, and we're going to run a new series starting from January. And we'd like your input as participants. So we're going to run a consultation to hear about the topic you would like to discuss about starting from next year. So again, thank you very much. And I hope to see you soon. So after Christmas, have a nice day all. Thank you.